Now let's go ahead and do the pores for our character's skin. Gonna go to object mode here. And I'm gonna go ahead and just show everything. Alt H. Okay, I'm gonna go zoom in and I'm gonna go and select the character, and you know what, I'm gonna go and select the eyeballs. Shift H. Alright, so we need to add pores here, and the way we're gonna do this is we're first gonna add generic pores on our character, which is just gonna be using our sculpting mode. If you go to sculpt mode here, right now I'm on subdivision 6. So the higher your subdivision level, the more defined those pores are going to be. And for my computer could only handle up to subdivision 6. Now you got to know what your computer can handle. That's why I always suggest to save your work first before you mess around with your multi-resolution. So the first pores that we're going to add is just going to be general pores, which is going to be applied throughout the body, even on the hands and on the arms here. And we're going to be using this mesh filter. If we click on there and we go to filter type, there's going to be random here, which is we're going to be using to just apply it everywhere. And it's going to be quite uniform. The pores everywhere. It's going to be similar all throughout. Then we're going to add variety of pores on the skin. We're going to have variety on the nose, on the face, and the forehead, and on the jaw area. So if you guys look here, there's going to be a variety of details here that you see on the face. And if you guys go to the resource folder, I have included a texture folder that has different type of skin pores here for you to use. There's 4 different textures here that we're going to be using later. One is going to be this texture right here, which is going to be what I call a hole texture. Because if you guys look here, especially on the nose area, okay, you're going to see this in the nose. You could see around here, we got some dots. Kind of like if you look at an orange, if you eat oranges, if you look at the skin, the orange peel, the skin of that orange, it's kind of like this, similar to that. You even see it here. All right. So we're going to add that whole texture around the face and the front here and the nasolabial fold area and also the nose. Okay. That texture, which is going to be this right here. Okay. Holes. Now the next one is going to be the main pores. All right. The main pores is kind of similar to the reptilian pores that I have here. The only difference is this main pores has the holes also included on there. If you look at the reptilian pores, it's kind of like a net-like type of pattern here that we got going. And you see that type of pattern if I zoom in here. So we see that type of pattern around this area. The only difference is a little stretched out, and there's a way to stretch out that texture when we're inside Blender using that alpha. Yeah, we see that there. We also see that pattern around this area, kind of like a reptilian type of net-like texture on there. And you could also add a little bit of that on the forehead and also around this area where we see some wrinkles. Areas where we see some wrinkles, you're gonna see a little bit of that net-like reptilian texture, and that's gonna be this right here. Yeah, the reptilian texture. And this main pores texture is going to be a mixture of that reptilian texture, mix it with the holes like texture. It's combined together in one alpha, and we could use that on the forehead area, and we could use a little bit of that also on the face area here on the side. So that's like it's similar to having a generic texture, but it has a little bit more variance of pattern on it. So the main pores is going to be what I say is going to be filling out most of the spots that we haven't added pores to. Some variance of details. So the point of having all these here is just to add variance to our pores other than the one that we're going to be using for our general pores. And then this here is going to be the skin bump texture, right? So the skin bump is going to be mainly found on the forehead. See, there's like some bumps right here. Okay. And also on the area where you see guys like to shave, of course. Like on the face, you're going to see some bumpiness on there. See, there's like some bumps on there. And areas where you see the facial hair. And if the guy is shaved, you could see that there's some razor bumps on there. Okay. So we could add a little bit of that there. So that's the reason why we need to have these texture here, which you could, like I said before, you could find this on the resource folder. All right, download this. All right, back on Blender here. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to be adding general pores all throughout the body, the face, everywhere, okay? And then we have to go to mesh filter, and then onto the filter type, we're going to set it to random. And then we're going to drag our mouse a little bit to the left. Click and drag to the left. And if you drag it a little too much, just drag it to the right. And if it gets a little crazy, you could always undo it, okay? If you don't like it the first time, you could undo it. Okay, I'm going to go and undo that. I don't like it. And another thing that we need to make sure of is, you see the lips. We need to make sure that we mask out that lips. That way, it's not going to add the pores on the lips. We're going to add our little own custom wrinkles here and our custom textures on here. Okay, so let's go to our masking. And let's go and mask out this area. And you know what? I see a little issue right there that we need to kind of smooth out around the edges. I'm going to go to my smoothing here and bring down my smoothing intensity. I do not like this where it looks like there's a little bit of pixelation. And I think this area look like there's some strange bumpiness going on here. There you go. Lumpiness. Gonna smooth that out. Before you add the pores, it's very important that you're happy with your overall shape of your character. Otherwise, that means if you have to fix any part of the character, you're going to have to re-add the pores, which is not bad, but you know, to make it easier for yourself, it's best that you're happy with the overall shape and the wrinkles and all the tertiary forms, that you're happy with it. Okay, now back onto the mesh filter, random, and let's try again. I'm going to go zoom into the face. Oh yeah, let's go make sure that we mask out the lips, as I mentioned before, because we don't want any of the pores going this way, because we want to keep it smooth at the beginning, and then later we are going to add our own custom pores in here. Okay. All right. Also here. Press down on my numpad. Okay, and then I'm gonna go ahead and mask this area out. Mask that out. Not too concerned about the inside cavity at all. So as long as this is masked, I'm okay with it. Alright, and then I'm gonna go back to the mesh filter here. And I'm gonna go ahead and slowly drag it to the left, the mouth. Ooh. Maybe drag it to the right. Nope. To the left. Okay. Okay, so we see a little bit of that there, but I think it could be a little deeper. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do it again. Okay. I think it's close. Your first try, you want it deep, but not that deep where it looks a little strange. Okay. Alright, so I think something like this is fine. And there might be some areas here that I need to probably address. This part's a little too noisy. And yeah, it's okay. We could go ahead and go to our smoothing and smooth this out. I'm going to go to my smoothing, bring down my smoothing brush, and smooth this out. So maybe I don't want this part to be too much noise, so I'm gonna smooth this area out. And also here, I could kind of smooth out this part. Alright, smooth it out. Okay. And smooth this out. See the ear area? That's fine. Okay, so we got a general pores here. You could create a quick pores here. If you are on a rush and if you know that you have a deadline for a game, this is a quick pores to create in Blender. Looks like I forgot a little something here. I'm going to go ahead and smooth that out. And you can see that this area is smooth. I don't want to have to reuse this. If I go to mesh filter here, you could go ahead and try to mask this out. And then we could kind of go ahead and smooth it. Control I to invert it. And then we could go ahead and go to mesh filter and we could go and click and drag so it will only do it in that specific area. Alt M. Alright, so something like that. A quick fix. Alright. Oh geez. What is happening here? Looks like it did it on the lip area, which is not what I'm looking for. Let me go ahead and undo what I just did there. Okay, so that's what I forgot to do. I masked this area out without unmasking this. So I'm gonna undo it. There you go. Alright, and I'm gonna go ahead and make sure this is not being affected. Alright, back onto the shoulder area here. And onto the mesh filter. I'm gonna go ahead and click and drag. Alright, something like that. Alt M. There you go. Probably could go ahead and influence the other parts here. And smooth it. And then I'm going to go back to my mesh filter, click and drag. Alright, so great, something like that. And yeah, the lips is all good, it's nice and smooth. Later on, we're going to add our own wrinkles there to make it noisier. So right now, I'm just going to the areas that needs to be smoothed out a little bit because it's just too much pores on certain areas. Like this area here. Okay. And I think maybe the eyelids might be a little too much. Just kind of smooth it out. It's good to have a little noise, but not too much noise, I think, on the facial features like the eyes. We don't want to take it away from the eyelids. Alright. Now let's go ahead and add some variants to the skin. We go to our draw brush here, and we can go to our texture section and click on new. This is when we're gonna bring in our holes texture, our custom texture. And let's go open and find the folder that you have downloaded from the resource folder, which is going to be my skin pores that I included, skin pores textures folder. And we're going to use the holes first. All right, now let's go to our tool here, and we could go to our stroke dropout. On the stroke method, we could set it to anchored. And onto the texture area here, if you click on the drop down arrow, we do see our texture, which is good. On the mapping area, make sure you set it from tiled to area plane. That way, when you are adding your pores, maybe you're looking from this view and you're adding the pores like really on the side here, it's not going to deform the pores. So set it to area plane. And for the rest of this, we can just leave it as default. Now, if we go ahead and just going crank up the brush size, if we just go ahead and click and drag like real big, you can see the pores there, right? And if you, let's say you make a mistake and you press Control Z to undo, you can see how it's taken a long time just to undo that pores that you have added there. Work a way around this is by bringing down your strength of your brush size, of your brush intensity, okay? Bringing that down, Shift F, and just bring it down maybe to 0.01, but really low. And then you just click and drag a couple of times on your skin of the character. Now, if you go ahead and drag the strength up again, and then you click and drag, and let's say you make a mistake, you could Control Z, and now it's not lagging. It's not taking forever just to undo, okay? So it's very important to do that when you first starting creating skin pores using alphas. You have to do that for each new alpha that you have added. And if we go and click and drag, you see it's way too bumpy. We do see the pores that we need, but you could see that it looks like he's turning into a zombie, and then looks like there's a tumor coming out, and we don't want that, right? Control Z to undo that. We could bring down the strength, so maybe it's too much. We could set it to 0.4, about 0.4 or 0.5, click and drag. Still too much, right? And even though we set it to 0.2, it's a little better now. I think I'm going to set it to 0.4 for now. Later, we're going to bring it down. But I want to show you something that will allow us to easily make smoother pores. Like we don't want the edges to like pop out like a tumor. So we click and drag, right? You see that? We could bring down the strength, which is one way that we could do it to reduce the tumor like that's popping out when we drag it. We could go to our fall off here, and right now we have it smooth, right? The brush. We could set the fall off of the brush to custom, and we could mess around with the curve here. There's some dots here that you could click and drag. What we want, see right now what's happening is if we set it to custom, there's different types of fall off you could set. This is the smooth pores. So it starts out really, you can see it starts out large, like it's going to protrude your mesh out, and then it smooths away. And then we got this here, which is start out really puffy, and then it will smooth out around the edges. Now, what we want is, I'm going to set it to smooth. We kind of don't want it to pop out too much around at the beginning when we click and drag our alpha. So we kind of want it a little bit flat, like almost on the same level as this. So we do want the alpha to fade away. So you could see like around this area, yeah, it fades out here, right? You can see the dots all the way down, which is what we need. But what we need to kind of make this a little bit more down, like that. So now if we go and click and drag, it's definitely better. Now we could crank up our strength. Okay, now it's a little too low, so maybe go to fall off and maybe crank this up a little bit so it goes up slightly at the beginning. All right, so I think that's looking better. Click and drag. Yeah. And we could look at it in this way. Maybe it could work a little bit more if I go to Fallout. Maybe I could bring it down slightly. Bring it down slightly. Stroke. Fall off. Maybe bring this down. Okay. I think this will work. Yeah, I think this will work. So we could go ahead and start dragging our pores, our holes pores. We can click and drag. So you don't want it to be too small like this because you could see that there's some lumpiness there. We have to click and drag all the way up until it kind of fades away. And you could see the pores more like that, which is very important. And we could, I think it's a little too much. I'm gonna go and bring down the strength to maybe 0.55. I'm gonna go and click and drag. Okay, it's better. And click and drag again around this area. And here. Also here. And here. Now onto the nose area, we could turn off the symmetry. And then we can go and click and drag that. And drag some more like this. Okay. Now we don't want it to just abruptly stop. So when we have our holes pores here, what we want to do is we want to go to our strength and bring down our intensity of the brush. So we want it to gradually fade out and not to abruptly stop. So we're going to bring down intensity, and then around this area is going to be not as deep, the pores. And then as we go farther and farther away from the first set of pores that we have dragged, is going to gradually fade out. Okay, so it's not just going to stop right there. We could go ahead and bring down, right? I started out with 0.55 for the strength, so maybe I could set this next one to 0.4. I'm going to turn back my symmetry since I'm doing the face. So I'm going to go and click and drag. Click and drag. So just by adding this here, it adds a lot more realism. We see that there's more variance to the skin instantly. And I'm going to set this to 0.3. And then I'm going to go and click and drag around this area. You can see just gradually fade out. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the nose. I'm going to turn off my symmetry. So I'm going to set this to 0.4 and just gradually go to the edges here of the nose and drag it. And I'm going to set this to 0.3 and then just go ahead and click and drag. And even the wings of the nose is going to have a little bit of that, which is going to be just gradually fading out. Right? Okay, much more realistic. Okay, so that's going to be for the pores area for our skin there. Next pore that we could add is going to be the reptilian, the net-like pattern. So we could add it here, basically around the wrinkle area. We could add that. And let's go ahead and bring in the new alpha here. So we could go right where the textures are at. So this, we have the texture right here, right? And this is very important. You see the shield symbol? Go ahead and turn that on. What that does is, if you bring in new texture here, this is the old one is not going to remove. So this is going to be staying there. You could have a bunch of textures here of alphas here that you could use without having to re-import them over and over again. So make sure you have the shield turned on, and then click on this little icon, the new texture icon right here. Click on that, and you're gonna see, just wait for a few minutes, and then you're gonna see it turn black. And we're gonna have to plug in the new texture that we want, the new alpha texture, which is gonna be the reptilian one. So we could go back to our texture area here and then click open. And I'm gonna go back to my texture folder where I have my skin pores, and let's bring in the reptilian one. There it is. And let's go back to our tool settings here and scroll down, and now we see it. Okay, and we click here, you can see that there's the old one, which is going to be our hole, so we could go back to that anytime. And then we could also go back to the second one that we have added, which is the reptilian one. Okay, right now we still have it area plane, and we still have it anchored, so we could click and drag the pores here onto our skin. Now remember that we have to bring down every time we add a new texture alpha here. We need to make sure that we bring down intensity all the way down and click and drag a few times. That way, if we mess up, we could undo easily. All right, so you have to do that every time you add a new texture. So I'm gonna set this down to 0.001, and then I'm gonna turn on my symmetry and just drag a few times here and there. Okay, now I'm gonna go and slowly crank it up, Shift F. All right, now we go ahead and click and drag, and we see our reptilian-like texture there. And we still have the stroke, the fall off at custom, which is good. Now we go ahead and click and drag. You can see that we need to stretch this a little bit. So in order to stretch that texture, so it looks like it's kind of blending in more with our wrinkle here. Let me undo that. We could go to our texture area, texture properties, where you see the offset, the size here. The size right now, we have it equal, so we could stretch it out by cranking up in the X direction. Instead of cranking it up, we actually can bring it down. We're just going to set this to 0.5 instead of 1. And if you click and drag, now you can see that's definitely stretched out. I think it's a little too stretched out, so maybe I could set it to a lower value. So maybe I could set it to 0.4. Actually 0.6. And click and drag. Alright, it's better. And another thing is, I think it'll be easier for us, because right now if I click and drag, it's like I have to rotate my mouse also, or my stylus pen. So we could also change the angle here to 90 degrees. And then we can just click and drag easily. And there you go. Very nice. And I'm looking over here, I think there might be a little too much noise, so I'm going to go and smooth that out a bit. I'm going to go to my smoothing and, yeah, bring down my smoothing. And then just smooth this out slightly. It's a little too much noise. So I want to make the wrinkle, the net-like pattern, a little bit more prominent. So I'm going to go back to my draw. And yeah, go ahead and click and drag. I can drag. I'm going to go ahead and set the Madcap to Studio. I think I could crank up the intensity slightly and click and drag. I just think it was a little too much of shadow. So, here you go. And click and drag again. So yeah, we could go to the areas here that has wrinkles and just slightly add this. And I think I could probably crank this add a little bit more here, make it more prominent. There you go. And I'm gonna go ahead and bring down my intensity so it just gradually fades out. And then maybe I can add a little bit here. Bring down my intensity. So I'm gonna go and turn on my Madcap again. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and add some here maybe. Crank up my intensity. Go. And also here, basically the areas where we have some wrinkles, I want to add this. Also here, a little bit of that there. Okay, and you can also add it on this region. Now at the center here, I do want to turn off symmetry, otherwise it's gonna look very off. Okay, something like that. And here, so here, you know what, I'm gonna add some right here. I'm gonna go ahead and change this to Studio. Here we go. And some right there. Here. Okay. And let's see, maybe some other areas here that might have some wrinkles, like maybe around this area where we smile a lot, and there's going to be some wrinkles around our nasolabial fold. I'm going to turn on the symmetry as I do this part. Great. Maybe we could add a little bit here in this area. Just add some variance. Bring down the intensity. Have it gradually fade out. And also here, we could add some variance around the ear area. I'm going to set the angle back to 0. Click and drag. You know what? It's actually better to have it 90 degrees, so I won't have to rotate as much. Add some a little here, a little bit here. Bring down my intensity. It's very subtle, but it is there. Maybe I could add a little bit here also. Here you go. Much better. You can drag around this area. Very nice. Cool. All right. Now we could also add some main pores on the forehead, and I think I'm gonna add some of this reptilian texture. Very subtle. I'm gonna turn off my symmetry for this. So around the areas where we know the wrinkles are gonna be for his forehead, we could add that there. And to add more variance, we could add the other textures that we have, which is gonna be in the main pores. I'm gonna go back to the texture area and then click on this symbol right here next to the shield to create a brand new alpha texture. Oh yeah, and one more thing, we forgot to click on the shield. So let's go back to the old texture here and make sure you turn on the shield for that. Okay, so yeah, for each alpha, turn on the shield. Okay, for this one, let's go ahead and plug in another alpha, which is going to be the main pores one, just to fill up and add more variance on other places like the forehead and maybe around the side of the face. Down here. And then I'm going to make sure I turn on my shield here. I'm going to set the angle back to 0. And then the size X, I'm going to set it back to 1. And of course, we still have it anchored, and fall up is still at custom. And yeah, we could go ahead and add a little bit more variance here. And I'm going to go ahead. Okay, you see how when I press undo and it's taking forever to undo it? I forgot to bring down the strength all the way down. And then just click and drag a few times. And then you could go ahead and add as you wish. And then you can see it's no longer lagging. All right, so right now I'm just adding some variance to the to the forehead here. You could also hold control on your keyboard and it will give you a different type of effect. It will look a little bumpy. See that? Which is nice if you want some bumpiness on the forehead. Which is kind of like what I'm doing right now. Add a little variance and some bumpiness there. There you go. Here. And bring down the strike. Alright. Just add some variance here. There you go. And you can tell you that when I get to the center, I do not turn on the symmetry at all. Because if you do, it will just look so obvious that you're trying to make things symmetrical if you have it at the center. Alright, and I'm also going to add some on the side. This time I could turn on symmetry. And a little bit of variance here. I'm going to bring down my intensity. Just click and drag. And onto the jaw. Add a little variance here and there. And maybe on the nose, I'm going to turn that off. So you could have some overlaying office really. But don't go overboard with the overlapping because you might get too noisy. So I usually just have at least maybe just 2 overlapping, 3 at the most, but anything more than that, it starts to look very strange and too noisy. So just be careful with that. Alright, and let's say we could add some bumps here. So I'm going to create a brand new texture here. And I'm going to turn on my shield here, go to open. And this time I'm going to bring in the bumpiness, skin bumps right here. Okay, and double checking here. So right now we have the skin bumps and we still have all of the texture that we have. We could go back to any of these anytime if we want to, because we had the shield turned on. Alright, and remember, if once you add a new alpha, bring down your intensity for the brush and then click and drag a few times. Crank up the intensity and then add as you go. Alright, so I think he has most of his bumps on the forehead. Like I said, you could also hold control and you see it gives you like some hole-like effect, some variance on there. So yeah, so I'm gonna go in and just add all these bumpiness on his forehead there. You mainly see it on the forehead. Crank up the intensity, so maybe there's some that's going to be a little bit more deeper. Mess around with your intensity, mess around with your brush size to add some variance to your skin pores. Maybe here. And you tend to see it also around this area. A lot of the skin bumps also, you tend to see it here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Also here. And some right there. Here. And maybe I could add some on the chin area here. And by adding this also, it gives us that asymmetrical feel to our character. I could also hold control and click and drag. And that would add a little break there on our skin also. And if I hold control and drag, you can see that there's some extra holes that I could make on the nose area. I'm going to hold control here. Hold control and drag. looking good. That's looking good. You can see this is much more realistic. Now that we have added some variance in the skin, it gives a much more realistic feel to our skin here. Bring down my intensity and just add a little bit of variance here. There you go. Very nice. And yeah, you can see that the lips is very smooth. We're gonna go ahead and add our macro details there in the next video.